a story written by Moonrise Romance Library. Chapter 1, Shadows in the Forest. The forest swallowed the last threads of daylight as Lyra pushed deeper into its heart. Her leather satchel thumped against her hip with each step, nearly empty save for a handful of wilted chamomile. Not enough. Mother's fever had climbed through the afternoon, her skin burning like coals beneath Lyra's palm. She needed moonpetal. The silvery herb grew only in the ancient grove, where the oldest pines stretched their gnarled branches toward the sky like arthritic fingers. Her breath misted in the cooling air. Autumn had sharpened its teeth early this year, and the scent of decaying leaves mixed with pine resin filled her lungs. Somewhere overhead, a crow released a warning cry that echoed through the canopy. Lyra's boots crunched over fallen twigs. The familiar path had disappeared 10 minutes ago, but she'd walked these woods since childhood. The grove lay just beyond the next rise, past the lightning-struck oak that stood sentinel at the border between pack territory and the wild lands beyond. The first sound that didn't belong reached her ears as she crested the hill. A woman's laugh, low and throaty, intimate in a way that made Lyra's steps falter. She froze, one hand gripping the strap of her satchel. The grove stretched before her in the gathering darkness, moon petals glowing faintly between exposed roots. But there, pressed against the ancient oak, two figures moved in an embrace that left no room for misunderstanding. The Alpha. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. She knew the breadth of those shoulders, the particular way he held himself even in passion. Marcus led their pack with an iron fist wrapped in velvet promises, unmated, untouchable, the most powerful wolf for 3 territories. And the woman in his arms was not from their pack. Lyra caught the scent on the wind, pine and smoke, tinged with the bittersweet musk of the Northern Ridge pack. Their rivals, their enemies in all but outright war. She should leave. Now, her feet remained rooted to the forest floor. The woman tilted her head back, exposing the elegant line of her throat. Moonlight caught her features, sharp and beautiful, with hair like spilled ink cascading over her bare shoulders. The Alpha's mouth traced a path along her neck, his hands tangled in that waterfall of darkness. A twig snapped beneath Lyra's boot. The sound cracked through the grove like a whip. Marcus's head jerked up, his eyes finding hers across the distance with predatory precision. They flashed gold in the dimness, wolf sight, enhanced and deadly. The woman tensed against him, her own gaze swinging toward Lyra with feline awareness. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Marcus was striding toward her, his shirt hanging open, his expression shifting from shock to something far more dangerous. The woman melted into the shadows behind him, a ghost disappearing into the trees. Lyra, her name on his lips sounded like a curse. She stumbled backward, her satchel sliding from nerveless fingers. I was gathering herbs for my mother. I didn't mean to see. He closed the distance between them in seconds, moving with that unnatural speed that reminded her exactly what he was. What they all were beneath the skin. Didn't mean to spy on your Alpha. No, I swear, I just needed moonpetal. She has a fever and... His hand shot out, fingers closing around her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to trap. His thumb pressed against her racing pulse, counting each terrified beat. Who did you see me with? His voice had dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than a shout. I couldn't tell, it was dark. Liar, the word hissed between his teeth. He leaned closer, and she smelled pine smoke clinging to his skin, the other woman's scent damning evidence. You saw her face, you know what she is. Tears burned behind Lyra's eyes. She wanted to wrench free, to run until her lungs gave out, but his grip held steady, and his eyes pinned her in place like a butterfly under glass. I won't tell anyone, she whispered. Please, I just want to go home. Something flickered across his face, calculation cold as winter frost. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the tone he used to pass judgment and issue commands that could not be refused. No, you won't tell anyone, because if a single word of this reaches the pack, I will know it came from you. His grip tightened just a fraction. And I will gut your father in the town square. I will make your mother watch before I end her suffering. Your sister, sweet little Maya, barely 13, she'll disappear into the slave markets before dawn." The forest tilted around Lyra. Her stomach lurched. "Do you understand me?" She managed a nod, though her neck felt like rusted iron. "Say it." "I understand." The words scraped her throat raw. "I won't tell anyone, ever." He held her gaze a moment longer, then released her wrist. She nearly collapsed. "Gather your herbs," he said, stepping back. "Go tend to your mother, and remember, I can reach your family anytime I choose, day or night, asleep or awake." He turned, melting into the shadows as completely as his lover had. "I'll be watching." Lyra's legs gave out the moment he vanished. She sank to her knees among the fallen leaves, her whole body shaking so violently she could hear her teeth chatter. The moon petals glowed innocently nearby, oblivious to the poison now seeping through her life. She had to get home, had to pretend this never happened, had to carry this secret until it crushed her. Chapter 2: The Mating Ceremony. 3 months had carved hollows beneath Lyra's eyes that no amount of sleep could fill. Mother's fever had broken 2 days after that night in the forest, but Lyra's own sickness, the kind that lived in shadows and silence, had only deepened its roots. She saw him everywhere. At pack gatherings, his gaze would find her across crowded rooms, a reminder sharp as a blade pressed to her throat. In the market square, he'd nod in her direction, and her father would beam with foolish pride that the alpha acknowledged his daughter. At training sessions, he'd watch her spar with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The secret festered like an infected wound, poisoning everything it touched. Now she stood in the ceremonial clearing, surrounded by 24 unmated females, their excitement crackling through the autumn air like lightning before a storm. The full moon hung fat and silver overhead, casting everything in stark relief. Torches ringed the space, their flames dancing in the night breeze. Lyra's ceremonial dress, white linen embroidered with silver thread, felt like a burial shroud. "He's looking this way," Maya whispered beside her, practically vibrating with vicarious thrill. Her sister had begged to attend despite being too young to participate, and their parents had relented. "Oh, Lyra, what if he chooses you? You'd be Luna. Can you imagine?" Lyra could imagine. She'd imagined it every sleepless night for weeks, ever since the whispers started. The alpha had been seen watching her, asking questions about her family. The pack elders speculated endlessly, would he finally choose a mate? And if so, who? "Breathe," Maya urged, squeezing her hand. "You look like you're going to faint." The ceremonial drums began, their rhythm matching Lyra's thundering pulse. The crowd parted, and Marcus emerged from the pack house, resplendent in traditional black leather and furs. Firelight caught the silver threading at his collar, making him look every inch the powerful alpha he was. Their eyes met across the clearing. He smiled. The elder council took their positions around the sacred fire pit, where flames leaped and writhed, casting dancing shadows across weathered faces. Elder Thomas raised his staff, and silence fell like a hammer. "Under the witness of the full moon and the ancient spirits of our bloodline, we gather for the sacred choosing," his voice rang out. "Alpha Marcus, son of Alexander, leader of the Shadowpine Pack, approach and name your chosen mate." Marcus moved through the crowd with that liquid grace that reminded everyone he was apex predator wrapped in human skin. Unmated females straightened, arranged their hair, offered their prettiest smiles. He walked past them all. Lyra's lungs forgot how to work as he stopped directly before her. This close, she could see the calculation in his golden eyes, the satisfaction curving his lips. He thought he'd won. Thought his threats had bound her more surely than any mating ceremony ever could. "I choose Lyra," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. "Daughter of James, sister of Maya, I claim her as my mate and future Luna of the Shadowpine Pack." The crowd erupted. Cheers and ululating cries of celebration split the night. Someone, probably her mother, released a sob of joy. Maya grabbed her arm, shaking her with excitement. But Lyra heard nothing except the roaring in her ears. Marcus extended his hand, palm up, an invitation, a command. His eyes promised consequences if she refused, reminded her of 3 people she loved more than her own life. She saw it all unfold in an instant, years of living beside this man, of sharing his bed while knowing the rot at his core, of watching him touch her while remembering how he'd touched that woman against the oak tree, of becoming complicit in his lies, his betrayals, of letting him make a mockery of everything sacred. The secret would crush her, or she would speak it and face the crushing herself. Her sister's hand slipped from her arm. "No," Lyra said. The word dropped into the celebration like a stone into still water. Ripples of confusion spread outward. The cheering faltered, died. "What?" Marcus's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened to chips of amber ice. Lyra's voice shook, but she forced it louder. "I said no. I reject your claim." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elder Thomas stepped forward, his face creased with concern. "Child, do you understand what you're saying? To refuse an alpha's choosing." "I understand." Her hands trembled violently, so she clasped them together. "I cannot accept a mate who dishonors the bond before it's even made." Marcus's expression shifted, confusion giving way to warning. "Careful, Lyra." But she'd spent 3 months being careful. 3 months watching the walls close in. 3 months imagining a lifetime of this suffocating silence. Something inside her snapped clean through. "I can't go with a cheating mate." The silence that followed felt alive, a breathing thing with teeth and claws. Someone in the crowd made a strangled sound. Maya grabbed her arm again, this time in horror rather than excitement. Marcus took a step toward her, and she saw murder flash across his face before he schooled it into indignant outrage. "You dare accuse me? Before the pack, before the elders, before the sacred ceremony itself." "Yes," the word came easier now. "I accuse you." "Then prove it." His voice cracked like a whip. "These are serious charges, Lyra, the gravest insult you could offer your alpha, so prove them or face the consequences of bearing false witness." Her father pushed through the crowd, his face white as bone. "Lyra, please, whatever you think you know." "I saw him." She kept her eyes locked on Marcus, watched his jaw clench. 3 months ago in the ancient grove, with a she-wolf from Northern Ridge Pack, I saw them together. The crowd's murmur built to a roar. Northern Ridge, their rivals, their enemies. The implications crashed over them like a wave. Marcus spread his hands, the picture of wounded dignity. The fevered imagination of a girl who doesn't want to accept her duty. Perhaps she hoped for a different match and concocts lies to escape her fate. "I'm not lying." "Then show us proof." Elder Thomas's voice carried stern authority. "Testimony requires evidence, child. Without it—" "I have no proof," Lyra admitted, and felt her world tilt beneath her feet. "Only my word." "Your word," Marcus's smile returned, sharp as broken glass. "Against your alpha's honor." Elder Thomas's expression hardened with regret and duty. "Lyra, daughter of James, you have made grave accusations without evidence. You have disrupted sacred ceremony and dishonored your alpha before the assembled pack. The punishment for such transgression is—" "Imprisonment," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "until she recants her lies and begs forgiveness." Guards materialized from the crowd, pack enforcers who obeyed without question. They took her arms gently, but their grip allowed no escape. Maya was crying. Her mother had collapsed into her father's arms. The ceremonial clearing that had rung with celebration now hummed with scandal and shock. As they led her away, Lyra looked back once. Marcus watched her go, his expression triumphant. She'd chosen truth over safety. Now she'd learn the cost. Chapter 3: The Price of Truth. The prison beneath the pack house smelled of damp stone and despair. Iron bars separated Lyra from the narrow corridor, where a single torch guttered, throwing shadows that writhed like living things across rough-hewn walls. The guards had stripped her ceremonial dress, replacing it with coarse gray linen that scratched her skin raw. She'd been here 3 days before anyone came. The sound of boots on stone stairs made her lift her head from where she'd curled against the wall, knees drawn to her chest. Elder Thomas descended slowly, each step deliberate, his weathered face grave in the torchlight. "Child," he stopped outside her cell, gnarled hands wrapped around the iron bars. "The pack demands answers." Lyra's laugh scraped her throat like shattered glass. "I gave them the truth. They chose not to believe it." "Without proof, truth is merely opinion." He sighed, the sound heavy with something that might have been sympathy. "Marcus has called for a formal trial, 3 days hence. If you cannot provide evidence of your claims, the council will have no choice but to declare you." "A liar." The word tasted bitter as poison. "I know." "Recant." Thomas leaned closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Say you were mistaken, that shadows and moonlight deceived you. Beg the Alpha's forgiveness. He might show mercy." "And bind myself to him anyway." Lyra pushed to her feet, ignoring how her legs trembled. "Live the lie I tried to expose." "Live," Thomas emphasized. "The alternative is exile, Lyra. Cast out from the pack, alone in territories where rogues and worse things hunt. You're barely 20 summers old. You wouldn't survive a month." After he left, the silence pressed against her ears until they rang. She counted stones in the wall, traced cracks in the mortar with her fingertips, tried not to think about Maya's tear-streaked face as the guards had dragged her away. Days bled into one another, marked only by the twice-daily arrival of stale bread and water. Sometimes she heard voices from above, pack members going about their lives while she rotted beneath their feet. Once, she thought she heard her mother weeping, but perhaps that was only the wind through the ventilation grate. On the 7th day, her father came. He looked like he'd aged a decade. Gray streaked his temples where none had been before, and his shoulders, always so straight, so proud, curved inward like he carried stones on his back. "Papa," the word broke on a sob. "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you do this to us, to yourself?" "I told the truth." "You told a story no one can verify." He gripped the bars, knuckles white. "Do you know what they're saying? That you're jealous. That you wanted the Alpha to choose someone else, that boy from the Southern Territory, perhaps. That you fabricated this tale out of spite." "That's not." "Your mother can't show her face in the market. Maya's been pulled from training sessions. They're saying our bloodline breeds liars and traitors." His eyes glistened. "We're being shunned, Lyra, because of you." The accusation hit harder than any physical blow. She'd known there would be consequences, but hearing them laid out in her father's devastated voice made them real in a way her imagination hadn't prepared her for. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I couldn't, Papa, if you'd seen what I saw." "I don't want to hear it." He released the bars, stepping back. "The trial is tomorrow. For all our sakes, tell them you were wrong." He didn't visit again. The trial lasted less than an hour. The entire pack crammed into the ceremonial hall, their faces ranging from curious to contemptuous. Lyra stood before the elder council in chains, actual iron chains that bit into her wrists and ankles as if she were a danger to anyone but herself. Marcus sat among the council, the picture of composed leadership. He'd said little, let the elders ask their questions, only interjecting when necessary to remind them of his spotless reputation, his years of dedicated service to the pack. "Final chance, Lyra," Elder Thomas intoned. "Do you have any evidence to support your accusation?" Her mouth opened, closed. The truth sat on her tongue. "I saw them, I know what I saw, but words without proof were just noise." "No," she finally said. "No evidence." The council conferred in whispers that buzzed like angry wasps. Maya sat beside their mother in the crowd, both of them pale as ghosts. Her father stared at the floor. "Then we find you guilty of bearing false witness against your Alpha," Thomas announced. "The sentence is imprisonment until you recant your lies, followed by—" "Mercy," Marcus interrupted, rising smoothly. "I ask the council's mercy for this confused young woman. Let her remain imprisoned until she sees reason. Surely isolation will clear her fevered thoughts." His generosity drew murmurs of approval. Such a compassionate Alpha, forgiving even those who slandered him. Lyra wanted to scream. They returned her to the cell, and this time no one came to visit. Days became weeks. She scratched marks on the wall with a loose stone, counting time like a miser counts coins. 14 days, 21, 35. The guard who brought her food never spoke. The torch in the corridor burned down and was replaced, burned down and was replaced, a cycle as meaningless as her own existence had become. Had she been wrong? Not about what she'd seen, that remained vivid as yesterday, but about speaking up. She destroyed her family's standing, imprisoned herself, and accomplished nothing. Marcus still ruled. The pack still followed. And that woman from Northern Ridge still walked free somewhere, carrying on with her life while Lyra rotted in darkness. Maybe she was delusional. Maybe the shadows had played tricks. Maybe. No. She'd seen them, heard them, smelled the evidence on his skin. The truth didn't change just because no one believed it. 2 months into her imprisonment, Lyra stopped counting days. She existed in a gray haze of hunger and cold, her body growing thinner, her mind circling the same thoughts like a wolf chasing its tail. She'd spoken truth and paid for it with everything. The question that haunted her in the deepest hours wasn't whether she'd been right. It was whether being right mattered at all, when the world had already decided she was wrong. Chapter 4, The She-Wolf's Arrival. The council chamber door slammed open, with a crack that echoed through the pack house like a gunshot. Marcus looked up from the territory maps spread across the oak table, irritation flashing across his face. Elder Thomas had been mid-sentence, discussing border patrols, when the interruption shattered their meeting. A woman stood in the doorway, swaying like a sapling in a storm. She was beautiful despite the exhaustion etched into her features, despite the mud caked on her traveling cloak and the dark circles beneath her eyes. Raven-black hair hung in tangled waves past her shoulders, and her belly, rounded and unmistakable, pushed against the worn fabric of her dress. Marcus's face drained of color, so rapidly he might have been bleeding out. "I need to speak to Alpha Marcus," she said, her voice raw as if she'd been screaming or crying. "Now." Elder Thomas rose, his chair scraping against stone. "Young woman, you cannot simply." "I know," she stumbled forward, one hand braced against her swollen stomach. "I know I'm trespassing. I know this breaks protocol, but I have nowhere else to go." The other council members exchanged bewildered glances. Elder Marion moved toward her, concern softening her severe features. "Child, are you injured? Do you need?" "I need him." Her eyes locked on Marcus with desperate intensity. "I need the father of my child to acknowledge what he's done." The silence that followed felt sharp enough to draw blood. Marcus found his voice, though it came out strangled. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen this woman before in my life." "Liar," the word cracked like a whip. She reached into the leather bag slung across her body, movements jerky with exhaustion and fury. "You're a liar, Marcus, just like you were a liar when you whispered promises in my ear, when you said your pack would never accept a Northern Ridge wolf as Luna, but that didn't matter because what we had transcended pack politics." Elder Thomas's eyes widened. "Northern Ridge?" "Yes." She pulled something from her bag, a silver pendant that caught the lamplight and threw it back in sharp gleams. The Shadowpine pack emblem, worked in intricate detail, hanging from a leather cord. "He gave me this. 3 months ago in the ancient grove where we'd been meeting for half a year. He said it was a promise, that one day, when the time was right, we'd be together openly." Marcus lunged forward, but Elder Thomas caught his arm with surprising strength. "Let her speak." "She's lying," Marcus snarled. "Some Northern Ridge scheme to undermine our pack, too." "It was the night of the harvest moon," the woman continued, her voice gaining strength. "September 23rd. We met at sunset, as we always did. You were worried someone might have seen us the week before, but I told you no one ever came to the grove that late." Elder Marion sucked in a sharp breath. She turned to Marcus, her aged face etched with dawning horror. "September 23rd. That's the date Lyra claimed, the exact date she gave at the ceremony." The room tilted on its axis. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time since Lyra had known him, since anyone had known him, the alpha looked cornered. "What's your name?" Elder Thomas asked gently. "Kiera." She swayed again, and Marion quickly guided her into a chair. I was a hunter for the Northern Ridge Pack, until they discovered I was carrying a child with no bonded mate. They gave me two choices, reveal the father or face Exile. "And you chose Exile," Marion murmured. "I chose to protect him." Kira's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. "I thought he'd come for me, thought when he heard I'd been cast out, he'd finally make good on his promises, but weeks passed and I heard nothing. So I came here myself because our child deserves a father, deserves a pack." She looked at Marcus with eyes that held equal parts love and hatred, a combination Lyra understood with sudden, visceral clarity. "Tell them," Kira whispered. "Tell them the truth, Marcus, please." Marcus's jaw worked, but no sound emerged. The council members watched him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Elder Thomas still gripped his arm, as if expecting him to bolt. "The pendant," Elder Marion said quietly. "May I see it?" Kira handed it over with shaking fingers. Marion held it up to the light, examining the intricate metalwork. The pine tree worked in silver, the wolf's head emerging from its branches. Every pack member received a simple version at their coming of age, but this one bore additional markings along the back. Marion's face went ashen. "This is the Alpha's personal seal. I watched the smith create it for Marcus's ascension ceremony 5 years ago. There are only 3 in existence, one he wears, one kept in the pack vault, and one that was." She trailed off, looking at Marcus with something close to betrayal. "One that was supposed to be given to his future mate." "I was going to be his mate," Kira said softly. "He told me I was. Every time we met, every time he touched me, he promised." Marcus finally wrenched his arm free from Elder Thomas. "This is absurd. She could have stolen that pendant, fabricated this entire—" "September 23rd, Elder Thomas interrupted. His voice carried the weight of decades serving as the pack's memory keeper. "Lyra claimed she saw you with a Northern Ridge wolf in the ancient grove. September 23rd. The same night, the same place, the same pack affiliation this young woman describes." "Coincidence," Marcus spat. "Is it?" Marion stood, the pendant dangling from her fingers like an accusation. "Is it also coincidence that Lyra has been rotting in our prison for 2 months for speaking a truth we're now hearing confirmed? That we imprisoned an innocent girl for refusing to bind herself to a liar?" The room erupted. Council members spoke over each other, their voices rising in pitch and fury. Someone demanded Marcus be removed from the chamber immediately. Someone else called for Lyra's release. Marcus stood at the center of the chaos, his carefully constructed empire crumbling around him like sand castles before the tide. Kira watched it all with hollow eyes, one hand pressed to her belly where new life grew, living proof of everything he'd tried to bury. "I loved you," she said, and somehow her quiet voice cut through the noise. Everyone fell silent. "I gave up everything for you, my pack, my family, my honor, and you can't even admit I exist." Marcus's face twisted with something that might have been regret or rage, impossible to tell which. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I never asked you to give up anything." "No," Kira agreed. "You just made promises you never intended to keep." Elder Thomas moved toward the door, his decision clearly made. "Guards, release Lyra from imprisonment immediately, and someone tell her family." "Wait!" Marcus's command cracked through the air with alpha authority. For a moment the old power still worked. Everyone froze. Then Elder Marion smiled, a terrible expression that held no warmth at all. "No," she said simply, "I don't think we will." The word hung in the air like an execution order. And Marcus, for the first time in his life, had no response at all. Chapter 5, Ancient Laws Awakened. Elder Thomas moved to the center of the chamber, his walking staff striking the stone floor 3 times. The sound reverberated through the room like a judge's gavel, commanding absolute silence. "There are laws older than any wolf living in this pack," he began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Laws written in blood and bone by our ancestors, established when packs first learned to govern themselves rather than descend into chaos. Marcus's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You overstep, Thomas. Do I? The elder's eyes, faded with age but sharp as broken glass, fixed on him. Tell me, Alpha, or should I still call you that? Do you dispute the evidence before us? Evidence? Marcus's laugh came out harsh. A hysterical woman appears with a pendant that could have been stolen, claims. The pendant from the Alpha's personal collection, Elder Marion interrupted, holding it higher. The one locked in the vault that only you and the council have keys to access. Are you suggesting she broke into our most secure chamber? She could have. And the date, Elder Thomas continued relentlessly. September 23rd, the exact date Lyra gave at the mating ceremony. The date we dismissed as fantasy, as the desperate invention of a girl trying to escape her fate. Tell us, Marcus, how did Lyra know? How did she conjure the same specific night, the same location, the same pack affiliation, unless she witnessed exactly what she claimed? Sweat beaded on Marcus's temple. I don't know what game you're playing, but... No games. Elder Thomas's voice hardened to iron. Only truth, finally brought to light. You lied to this council. You imprisoned an innocent pack member to hide your shame. You violated the sacred trust between Alpha and Pack. The other council members formed a semicircle behind Thomas, their faces grave. Even those who'd been Marcus's strongest supporters looked at him now with disgust barely concealed. Elder Marion stepped forward. Ancient law is explicit on this matter. I can quote the exact passage if needed, but we all learned it as children. An Alpha who deceives his pack, who punishes the innocent to conceal his guilt, who breaks faith with sacred bonds, such a wolf has forsaken his right to lead. You cannot do this, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its commanding edge. He sounded almost desperate. I am Alpha by bloodright, my father before me, his father before him. Bloodright means nothing without honor, Thomas snapped. Your father led with integrity. Your grandfather died protecting this pack from rogues. And you rutted with our enemy and tried to force an innocent girl into your bed to keep her silent. The words landed like physical blows. Marcus staggered back a step. Kira had gone very still in her chair, watching the proceedings with wide eyes. Her hand never left her swollen belly, a protective gesture as old as motherhood itself. I demand a formal challenge, Marcus snarled, some of his old fire returning. Trial by combat. I'll face any wolf who dares question my right to lead. No, the single word from Elder Thomas carried finality. That tradition applies when succession is disputed. This is not succession. This is judgment for crimes committed. The law allows for no combat, no appeal, no second chances. You have been weighed by your own actions and found wanting. Marcus looked around the room, searching for allies, for anyone who might support him. The council members stared back with expressions ranging from anger to pity. None moved to his defense. This is a coup, he spat. You're using false accusations to seize power. Then let us retrieve Lyra, Elder Marion suggested quietly. Let us bring her here and ask if her accusations were false. Let us see if 2 months of imprisonment have changed her testimony. The threat hung in the air. They all knew what Lyra would say. Truth didn't shift with time or pressure. Marcus's shoulders sagged, just fractionally. It was the first crack in his armor, the first admission of defeat. What happens now? He asked, and the question sounded hollow. Elder Thomas drew himself up to his full height, though age had bent his spine. By the authority vested in this council by pack law and ancestral tradition, we strip you of your title as Alpha of the Shadowpine Pack. Effective immediately, you hold no rank, no authority, no claim to leadership. And, Marcus's voice had gone flat. And you will be exiled, Marion continued. You and your, she glanced at Kira, companion. At dawn, you will both be escorted to the northern border and cast out. You are forbidden from returning on pain of death. Your name will be struck from pack records. Your bloodline ends with you. Kira made a small, wounded sound. She hadn't expected this. hadn't realized that seeking Marcus's acknowledgement would cost her the chance at any pack at all. "The child," she whispered, "our child, bears the taint of its father's dishonor," Thomas said, not unkindly but firmly. "I'm sorry, young one, but ancient law is clear. The sins of the father extend to his offspring. The child cannot remain with the pack." Tears spilled down Kira's cheeks. She'd gambled everything on Marcus's honor, on the slim hope that he'd claim her and their baby. Instead, she'd condemned them both. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and something flickered in his expression. Regret, perhaps, or merely annoyance at the complication she represented. "I want to see Lyra," he said finally. "Before I go, I want to tell her." "No," Elder Marion's refusal was absolute. "You've done enough damage to that girl. She'll learn of your exile when we release her. You will never speak to her, see her, or come within 100 yards of her or her family again." Guards appeared at the doorway, 4 of the pack's strongest enforcers, summoned by some unseen signal. They approached Marcus cautiously, unsure if he'd fight. He didn't. As they led him from the chamber, Marcus turned back once. "This isn't over." "Yes," Elder Thomas said quietly, "it is." The door closed behind them, with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Kira remained in her chair, weeping silently, one hand on her belly where Marcus's child grew. A child who would never know pack life, never run with others beneath the full moon, never belong anywhere at all. Elder Marion moved to comfort her, but what comfort could be offered? Outside, the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. By the time the sun fully rose, Marcus would be gone. And Lyra would finally be free. Chapter 6, Freedom and Scars. The guards came for her at dawn. Lyra had been awake for hours. Sleep had become a luxury her body rarely afforded anymore. When the key scraped in the lock, she flinched, pressing herself against the cold stone wall before memory caught up with instinct. They weren't coming to hurt her. "It's time," the lead guard said, his voice gentle in a way it had never been before. "You're free to go." Free. The word felt foreign on her ears, a language she'd forgotten how to speak. She stood on unsteady legs. 2 months of near starvation and immobility had stolen her strength. The guard reached out to steady her, and she jerked away reflexively. His hand dropped, understanding flickering across his face. They led her up the stone stairs, each step an agony in muscles that had atrophied. The higher they climbed, the more light filtered down from above, growing from dim suggestion to painful reality. By the time they reached the ground level, tears streamed from her eyes, whether from the brightness or something deeper, she couldn't say. The packhouse doors opened. Sunlight crashed over her like a physical force. She stumbled, throwing up one skeletal arm to shield her face. The world was too bright, too loud, too much after months of gray silence. "Lyra." Maya's voice cracked across the distance. Then her sister was there, arms thrown around her, sobbing into her shoulder. The embrace hurt, everything hurt, but Lyra forced herself not to pull away. "You're so thin," Maya gasped between sobs. "Oh gods, what did they do to you?" Behind Maya, their parents stood frozen, their faces portraits of guilt and desperate relief. Their mother's hand covered her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent tears. Their father looked like he'd been gutted and left to bleed. "Papa," Lyra whispered. He moved then, crossing the distance in 3 strides and pulling both daughters into his arms. He smelled of wood smoke and leather oil, familiar, safe scents that belonged to a life Lyra wasn't sure existed anymore. "Forgive me," he choked out. "Please, Lyra, forgive me. I should have believed you. I should have stood with you. I should have." "It's done," she said, because what else could she say? Forgiveness felt too large to contemplate in this moment, pressed between her family's bodies while pack members gathered in clusters around the square, watching with expressions she couldn't quite read. Elder Thomas approached, leaning heavily on his staff. "The council owes you an apology that words cannot adequately convey. We failed you in the most fundamental way. A pack can fail one of its own." Lyra extracted herself from her family's embrace, swaying slightly. The elder looked older than he had 2 months ago, as if her imprisonment had aged him in ways time alone couldn't account for. "Marcus?" she asked. Exiled at first light, he and the Northern Ridge woman both. Thomas's expression hardened. "They crossed the border an hour ago and will never return." Something in Lyra's chest loosened, just a fraction. Not relief exactly. The damage was too deep for that, but perhaps the beginning of safety. The knowledge that she could walk through the forest without fear of encountering him, that she could sleep without wondering if he'd make good on his threats. "I want to see," she said. Her mother made a sound of protest, but Lyra was already moving toward the forest path, her legs remembering the rhythm even if they lacked the strength. Her family followed at a distance, uncertain, giving her space she desperately needed. The ancient grove looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less menacing. The oak tree where she'd witnessed Marcus's betrayal stood unchanged, indifferent to the chaos that single moment had unleashed. Beyond it, through the trees, she could just make out 2 figures moving north. Marcus's distinctive silhouette, proud even in exile. And beside him, the woman, Kira, one hand on her swollen belly, the other carrying a pack that held whatever remained of her life. Lyra watched them disappear into the forest's embrace, swallowed by shadows and distance. She'd won. She'd spoken truth and paid for it with blood and time and pieces of herself she'd never recover. And in the end, the truth had mattered, had changed everything. So why did victory taste like ash? "Lyra," Maya had followed her, hovering uncertainly at the grove's edge. "Everyone's talking about what you did, how brave you were. They're saying you're a hero." "I'm not a hero," Lyra's voice came out flat. "Heroes save people, I just refuse to lie." "That's the same thing." Was it? Lyra turned away from the forest, from the path Marcus had taken into his new life of exile and disgrace. The pack gathered in clusters throughout the square, their eyes following her with something between reverence and guilt. They saw her differently now, not as James's quiet daughter, but as the girl who'd stood alone against an alpha and survived. They didn't see the nights she'd spent curled on cold stone, wondering if speaking truth had been worth destroying everything. Didn't see how her hands still shook, how loud noises made her flinch, how the thought of crowds pressed against her chest like a physical weight. "I need time," she told Maya. I don't know what I need." Her sister squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever it is, we're here, however long it takes." The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. The pack slowly dispersed, returning to their lives, their routines. In a week, this would be a story they told. In a month, a legend. In a year, Lyra would be the girl who'd brought down an alpha with nothing but truth. But today, standing in the sunlight that hurt her eyes, surrounded by family who loved her but couldn't quite meet her gaze, Lyra felt only the hollow ache of survival. She'd freed herself, freed the pack from a leader unworthy of their trust. Now she had to learn how to live with the scars that freedom had cost. The journey toward healing stretched before her, long and uncertain as the forest path. But for the first time in 2 months, she could walk it in daylight. That would have to be enough. For now,